Hello. Welcome to this episode of a Creative Approach podcast. I'm your host, Karen Poirier-Brody. I'm always excited to speak with a new podcast guest, and that's especially true today as I welcome Stacy Julian. I think Stacy, as I'll mention later in the show, is a significant reason that I'm podcasting today. Stacy was an early internet pioneer in online craft classes with the community, and she occasionally did interviews with members of her community. I believe the discussion that Stacy and I had was one of the first recorded conversations that I made online. Wonder where those files are now. The original big picture scrapbooking site was sold and archived when I was at a very stressful time in my life, and I never got to download the files and classes from there, which I now regret. It was a great learning platform. Stacy was one of the founders of that site. She is a storyteller and a lover of family and her faith. You'll learn too how Stacy is a woman with a passion for color. Please visit the website www.acreativeapproachpodcast.com for show notes and links to more about Stacy and A Creative Approach podcast. It's winter and the short days send me to bed early. An early bedtime's a good thing because we have some major construction going on next door. They start first thing in the morning. I was sad to see everything from the home that was there, the pool, and all landscape, including most of the large old trees, removed. However, the building and landscaping are rapidly coming along, and the owners anticipate moving in during the summer months. Maybe I'll get to sleep in then. I have not yet made it to Squaw Valley for skiing. I'd hoped to go this weekend, but think I'll try during the week. I will take it very easy, but I love the exhilaration I feel on a slope. Well-groomed black runs at Boreal can tempt me, but at Squaw I'll stick to green and easy blue runs. For those unfamiliar with skiing, the slope of the mountainside determines the rating. Easy is green and difficult are black double diamond runs. Boreal Ski Resort is not quite as challenging as Squaw Valley's steeper slopes and longer courses. It's fun, though. I do have season's tickets now to Squaw, so I hope to get up at least 4 times to make it worthwhile. I've been scrapbooking a lot this month. I love combining photos and stories. Lately, I've been translating paper page ideas into digital ones in Photoshop. I've put my spin on the layouts and have used some of the ideas I've learned during this process to create my own designs. Scrapbooking is not only one of my favorite hobbies, but it has led me to the field of podcasting and to the study of fine art. So, of course, I'm delighted to introduce you today to a woman who played a significant role in developing my passion for this form of storytelling. Let's find out about Stacy Julian's history, her passions, and plans for the future in our conversation today. Welcome. I'm so pleased to have Stacy Julian with me today to talk about her creative approach to life. Welcome, Stacy.
Well, hello. Thank you for having me, Karen. This is really exciting for me. We've been friends for a number of years, so I'm thrilled that you would want to invite me on your show.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you. I think one of the first podcasts, or at least video interviews that I was on the internet was with you.
Yes.
Years ago.
Yes.
We don't want to date ourselves, but yes, that was way back when. So yes, you have been a great creative inspiration. And to put it mildly, I mean, there's a whole, I don't know that I'd ever have gotten into podcasting here if it wasn't for you.
Oh, wow. Well, I don't know if I can
think,
take credit for that, but
yeah. Well, I mean, it's that whole story
I'm
of
glad
getting.
that you found podcasting, because I think it's a gift that you have, that you've I've just have really enjoyed the show, the episodes that I've listened to. So
Well,
yeah,
thank
so
you.
if I have some role in that, bravo.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think, discovering your big picture scrapbooking, it was then, now big picture classes that you started and really grew, and being involved in that, and the wonderful friends that I made through that. And oh my goodness, I just, it goes on and on. I mean,
Yeah.
I've we have May Flom was a teacher, became a good friend, and I got involved with Fisketeers, which led me to all other kinds of people and people all around the world.
It's true. It's true. It really is. I think so often, like, how did I end up with friends in Australia and South Africa and London?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just cool.
It is cool. It's so nice
really
when you
is.
actually get to meet a number of them too.
Yep.
So I think that you have had a very fun creative life, from being an early pioneer in internet education to writing books, to being a speaker, to teaching people a lot of basics about scrapbooking and getting over inhibitions of telling their stories. I mean, there's just so much. So I'd like to hear in your words what it is that Stacy Julian does.
Oh, wow. Stacy is so curious about people and where they came from and why they are where they are, and what's unique about them. And so, that I love stories. I have always loved stories, and got a nice camera from my husband was actually in a medical residency in Chicago years ago, and I worked in a cardiac rehab unit. I had majored in kind of exercise science, not kind of. That's what it's not called that. It wasn't called that then, but that's what it is today. So I ended up, supporting him through this process of training and worked in cardiac rehab. And I met just this generous, post heart attack guy, and he owned a photo shop, and he gave me he owned a camera shop, sorry, and he gave me a really nice camera. And that was kind of the beginnings of me exploring things through the lens visually. And then shortly thereafter, a couple years later, we ended up in Utah. Actually, that was medical school, sorry. Ended up in Utah for medical residency. And I had just discovered a company called Dots, now called Close to My Heart, and I had signed up to sell rubber stamps. And that kind of blew my mind, that alone, because I always knew that I was creative as a child, but I hadn't given that part of me much nurturing for a number of years. And so headed back to Utah with this new little business, and discovered a store they sold rubber stamps, but they also sold scrapbooking supplies. And I was like, scrapbooking? What is that? what does that mean? And so I had these pictures that I had taken, and I just put them in photo albums, and I was getting better and better at it. And anyway, so I discovered, with my stamps and this whole new avenue of scrapbooking. So, I mean, my story right now is really more what I have done. From there, I became quickly involved in teaching, not only for Close to My Heart, but then also for a local scrapbook store. And at the scrapbook store, met some people who were starting a magazine called Creating Keepsakes. Was invited to sit on an editorial team. Shortly thereafter, was invited to go do some training, a PBS show, film episodes on a PBS show with the founder's wife, and just met people. Was at the right place at the right time at the beginnings of the scrapbooking industry. Was invited to write a book fairly early on. Started writing in 1999, 2000. The book was published in 2001. It was called Simple Scrapbooks. And it was a little bit of a different approach to scrapbooking, as certainly back then it was. Instead of just making individual pages, I proposed that you could do individual projects, that they would be very story-based. You might do one project just about one aspect of your life, maybe just about the relationship that you share with your mom, for example. And then, gosh, about a year and a half, 2 years later, a larger company purchased that Creating Keepsakes magazine. And when they purchased the magazine, they said, you really ought to have 2 magazines. If you're the number one publication in your enthusiast market, you should probably have 2 magazines. And so next thing I knew, I'd just given birth to my 4th little boy, and I got a phone call, and the voice on the other end said, what are your professional goals? And I'm like, not really sure I have professional goals.
Oh dear.
And she said, well, we'd like you to come, to the magazine offices and let's talk about it. And I left that meeting with the assignment to become editor of a new publication that was called Simple Scrapbooks, after my book. So I was the founding editor of Simple Scrapbooks magazine, which was in publication for about 8 years. And about 2 or 3 years before the magazine came to an end, I had the opportunity to write a book of my own, which launched a little website. I just wanted to put ideas that weren't going to make it into the book online, and get some interaction with people and share some additional ideas. And that almost overnight became something much bigger than I had ever anticipated. Or planned. I'm really not much of a planner, to be honest with you. Things take me by surprise. So, and I had met a cute girl who had designed this little website that was, this was not Web 2.0. This was Web 1.0, So like throw up a page, and we put up a little sign up, thing like, where we'd gather, I guess, names of people who wanted to know what you were doing, and overnight had 1,500 names. And so the designer called me the next day, and she goes, who are you? Why do people know who you are? And so within a number of months, she became my partner, and as well as another woman, and we launched Big Picture Scrapbooking. And it became, as far as I know, the first online education portal specifically focused on women. You know what I mean? There were some online learning that was going on in professional areas, but just in terms of just a place where creative women could gather and learn from each other, it was the first.
Yeah, I think so.
We learned together. I don't know how early you came on board, but it really was
pretty early, I think. There weren't very many classes offered.
Right. It was, we just learned together. We asked lots of questions of students, and they told us what they needed, and we tried to find someone who could teach it. And it was really a lot of fun,
Yeah.
And I sold that company to Studio Calico in 2014. And so have not been doing a whole lot since then in terms of the scrapbooking industry. I, from there, jumped pretty quickly right into family history, which in my mind is the same thing. You're telling family stories. It's just that you're including family members that have already moved on. And I'm so fascinated, and I've always been fascinated by connected stories. And I define that as just, one incident, event, decision, affects so many other people,
Oh yeah.
So look at why do I live here in Washington? Why did my grandpa choose to come here? Why, so so I'm always interested in that. And genealogy is one of my passions. Yes.
I have this real challenge that I can't easily put my tree up through using, I have a software that's supposed to interact with Ancestry.com.
Yeah.
I called them up one day and I said, I'm having trouble, now with something new in the program. And I said, I can't upload it. Do you think it's the size of my file? And they said, oh, how large is your file? And they said, and I said, well, I think it's around 100,000 names.
Oh.
And she gulped and she said, people usually when they call us are talking about a few hundred or 1,000. And then, she said, I think we've dealt up to 10,000, but I don't know. And then I found out it is the size of my file. And so far they haven't done anything to fix that.
But I think I
Wow.
can convert it to a GEDCOM and then maybe send it to the site. I don't know. I got to figure all that out. But
So
yeah.
that's crazy. So did you,
Yeah.
I mean, you must have inherited something. How did you come? I mean, that's a
I
lot
just
of
started
work.
tracking this stuff down. I mean, I was
And
one
it
of the
just-
very first people involved with Ancestry.com, and I was
Okay.
with Roots Web, and I used professionals. And I mean, there's whole areas of my family I haven't even hardly explored.
Yeah.
And I've been married 3 times, Stacy.
Yeah. So you've got
With people
multiple
whose
branches,
families, whose families have lived in America a long time. So
Yeah.
you
That's
know,
amazing.
It is. And
It
then
really
if you're French
is.
Canadian, I always understand that, the French brought their bureaucracy with them in 1600 and something, early 1600s. And everything's in triplicate. And so if you have Canadian ancestry, it's actually pretty easy to find your records,
Huh. I didn't know that.
especially French Canadian. So that's been interesting. But I've even been able to trace my Native American roots back to the 1700s. So that's pretty cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
I
Anyway,
know.
so
I can understand this fascination is what I'm telling
It's
you.
a fascination. It's a curiosity. And,
Yeah.
it led me, I've done some teaching at an event called Roots Tech that's
Mm-hmm.
in Salt Lake City every winter-ish. And anyway, so that's
That'd be
just
fun to go to.
that's where I've been. That's what I've done. And it's
Mm-hmm.
really, if I had to say one word, it's story, right? It all revolves around.
Well, are you helping people tell their stories? Because, I have all this information, but sometimes I think, well, now how do I get this, into a really good story?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and even just taking, as you do genealogy work, you're looking for sources, right, to verify or validate, someone's existence. And even if you line those up in chronological order, that's a story. It's at least the framework of a story. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You go from a birth record to, census to, marriage and schooling and just different things that pop up that are considered genealogical sources are really pinpoints along someone's, storyline. So it's just cool. I love all of it.
Well, that is cool. But, you haven't given up scrapbooking. One of the things I was thinking about when I wanted to invite you to come on the show was I saw you taught a class recently at the big picture classes that Studio Calico owns. Recently.
Yeah,
so you still keep your hand in that?
I'm keeping my hand in it. And I do projects. I definitely am more of a project-based person, scrapbooker. And so I do 2 or 3 projects a year. And I have embraced social media as an avenue for storytelling. And then just kind of this year picked my blog back up because I thought I just kind of missed writing. I'm not really a writer, but you certainly are ever going to be a writer if you don't write. So I'm kind of picked that up and trying to do better there as well, just as an archive for my own family and archiving many of the pages and things I've done. I want to get sort of just online, saved. So
right, that's a good way to preserve them. I think people we want to put things. I think it's nice to put things into paper and to print, but it's also nice to record them in digital form.
I do too.
Yeah, there's some of my family that won't look at it unless it's digital.
Well, that's true, right? And I don't even know that my family will look at it. Maybe they won't, but I'm going to leave with it archived whether they are interested or not. And I think they will be someday.
Yeah, well, you keep hoping they'd have some interest in it.
And I do actually know already. My cute oldest son, he's married, and he texted me a picture last night. And we've had a tradition where I give him an ornament every year. That's certainly not super unique, but he texted me a picture of his wife with their cute little 3.5 foot tall Christmas tree, and it's got lights on it. And then it's got the one ornament right in the middle, that I gave him last year. And, so there's, these things that you do, you know what I mean, over time, traditions, rituals that to me tie into storytelling, weaving your family story together. They're passed on. They really are. You know what I mean? So,
yeah.
And I think if anything, I want to leave my kids, I don't worry so much about all the pages or the projects or, being in order, but I worry about them. I want to give them a love of storytelling. I mean, that's the most important thing to pass on. So it's working, I think. I hope.
Well, and you sort of got into this step by step. Did you have any kind of training or education? You said you were creative as a kid. Did you do any kind of art projects or things when you were younger?
Well, I mean, I think curiosity is really an imagination. I grew up with 2.5 acres of just woods behind my house. And this was back in the day when parents would say, go play. Come home for dinner.
Right.
And we did. And we had this fallen tree, that the roots were probably 6 or 7 feet off the ground. And that became our house. And we had an elevator branch that we could jump up and, go down to the first floor. And we created, just worlds, in my backyard. And then I also loved, my mom still teases me to this day because I used to watch any commercial. Back in the 70s, the commercials were often like let me come up with something, Stacy. Like our laundry detergent is better than their laundry. Laundry detergent A does this and laundry detergent B does this. They would set up these comparative trials, I guess, put our hand lotion on a leaf and compare it to a leaf without hand lotion. And I did that. I had little experiments all over the house. I would try these products and test them out. And and my mom was crazy. We purchased this house with this land behind it and this old swimming pool that the heater didn't work. And it was just, a playground of fix things and find solutions. And my mom had no money in early, when I'm the oldest of 5 children. And so I remember very distinctly sitting in the car with my brother, my next brother down. And my mom this is behind a carpet store, and she is in the dumpster behind the carpet store, flinging pieces of carpet out of the dumpster onto a pile. And then we all get out of the car and picked up these pieces of carpeting that were probably, 3 feet long by 1 feet. They were strips or squares. Mm-hmm. And we threw them in a big, gunny sack and took them home. And my mom had a bucket of tar, and she made our living room carpet. Because my kids we're not replacing the carpet. And my mom's like, I'm going to do it with or without you. And so, and how many opportunities do you have as a child when your living room carpet is like a checkerboard? That alone becomes the map of the world. And I'm in this country and you're in that country. And you know what I mean?
No wonder you have a love of color.
Yeah, no, seriously, and she found this old door and hung it with big, heavy chains, and it became the shelf that the TV sat on. And I look back now at pictures and I'm like, seriously? Like it's not even furniture, what I mean? But I didn't know it at the time. I just thought it was way cool. So
yeah,
lots of creativity in my mom. She was just, she was never happy with no. She just created solutions, when she faced an obstacle. So
well, when you don't have much money, you do what you can. We managed with things from thrift stores all my life when I was a kid.
Right. Well, necessity is the mother of invention, right?
I know. Yeah, my grandmother was amazing at being able to go through clothes and find zippers, buttons, and fabric, and put them all together and come up with some really cool stuff.
Yes, exactly.
As far as clothes. Now, well, we mentioned here, I just touched on something and it brought back this memory that one of the things I associate a lot with Stacy Julian is color. And I know that's how you organize a lot of things, which is, I think, a really fascinating thing. You organize your creative supplies that way.
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
I just, color to me, I didn't know it in this way until I took a class. I was able to take a class in 2004 from Leatrice Eisman, who's the executive director of Pantone. So that's the language of color across the world, for listeners who might not know. But so I took a 3-day seminar with her, and I remember her just saying color is emotion. It's the language of emotion. And so I'm so drawn to it. And for me, when I sit down to create really a scrapbook page, really, but anything, I think color first, you know what I mean? So I, like you say, I put all of my supplies in these big bins by the color. So I have a green and a yellow and a red and a turquoise, and I just pull it out on the table and I look at the photos in front of me, and maybe they have a couple colors that I pull those colors out, or maybe I just start with the colors that represent the emotions that I want to capture, right, in this project or page. And so I start with color a lot.
It's a good place to start.
It's a good place to start. And I find now it's such a great solution because I find some little piece of whatever around my house, ribbon, or the other day I found this little notebook and I'm like, what do I do with this? You know how you pick stuff up and you're like, what do I do with this? And I'm like, it's red. I'm going to go stick it in the red bin. So
right.
It's a place for me to put stuff, and then I get to discover it later, in a different context. So
yeah, that's cool. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah,
well, that's
crazy.
One way. Yes, my organization is a little lacking, but I have a few things organized by color. My ribbon collection, I'm looking at that right now. I walk in my room, I have a sign that says create in all different colors, and then there's just jars full of ribbon.
And it makes you happy, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean,
yes.
even, it calls to you until finally you move the mess out of the way and you sit down and
and get going.
Color is energizing for sure, for me anyway.
Yeah. And now you have, well, that's one of the things. Not only did you do the simple scrapbooks, but you also, well, I don't know, you didn't turn that, into a book, but into a class about organizing and about organizing your photos. Because that's one thing also that has been helpful. I think that helps people even when they're not actually scrapbooking. It's a way to keep track of things before you assign them an album space or a scrapbook page space or something, is to find that system that works for you, because now we produce so many pictures.
And I'm actually hoping to kind of resurrect that class. So I taught a class for years called A Library of Memories that does begin with the flow of pictures, into your life, and then it helps you prioritize, and the opposite of prioritize is purge. So get rid of and prioritize so that you can find photos you really love when you want to find them, so that you can create with them and tell stories with them. And then so the Library of Memories, the end result is a library, literally a library of completed albums with pages and project-based albums. It becomes a library in your home. And then I think in 2008 or 9, I wrote a book called Photo Freedom. So I've kind of separated them out in my mind. Photo Freedom is the system that takes care of your photos, right?
Yeah.
And that's beneficial, like you say, to anyone who has photos. We all do, on these devices that we carry around. And then Library of Memories is an extension of Photo Freedom if you're a scrapbooker and if you want to, use your photos in that way.
Yeah, I'll always think of you as somebody who really has some really useful approaches. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times I hear people say, well, I organize my albums or my photos sort of like Stacy Julian, my own variation of that. And I admit that too. That's what I would say too. But I noticed that I'm not the only one. So you've made an impact.
And people still email me. I got an email last week, and so it really is, it's fun. And I think the reason it's successful, if it is because, they're principles. I love to teach principles, and I love to say to someone, this is what I do. Now take this and go, and you adapt it to you and you create, so there's no hard, fast rules. There's just principles that make sense. And I think that's why it's stuck for people, is because they know that they have to tweak it, and make it work for them, especially as technology continues to evolve and, as we end up with 50,000 photos when we thought 10,000 was bad. So,
and we didn't even imagine a terabyte of storage, and now we think of how many terabytes you need for everything. I remember the storage used to be a really big issue that we would discuss at length in the earlier days. Now, one of the things about, you developed this system, and then when you're having that, what do you think are some of the most important, because you're a person who likes connections, and I imagine having this system has allowed you to make these kind of connections. What are some of the really some insights into how connections work for you?
I think being able to identify, first of all, the system is based on, I think there's 4 large categories, if you will, of stories that we tell. We tell stories about ourselves and about our immediate families. We tell stories about the people that we meet and love and work with and associate with. We tell stories about places that we've been, whether we've lived there or just visited, and we tell stories about things that we do. And so the people, places, things, and us categories, I'm able to teach people how to, within those big categories that really are universal, I'm able to, with some exercises, and able to help them identify subcategories that are very personal and unique to them. And then in those subcategories, you can create a tag, to mark a digital photo, or if you have physical prints, you can file prints into those subcategories, and not too many. You're very careful about which photos. You just your very, very best photos, you know what I mean? Or very telling photos you tag or set aside in these subcategories, in these larger categories of us, people, places, things. And over time, as you collect or tag, then you're able to pull up a selection of photos. Let's say I can now pull up, I can look at photos. I go in to open up my photo program on my Mac computer, and I type us_Clark, and I'm able to see the best pictures of my oldest son, Clark, spanning 24 years. So that's not, just to have a view like that, then you're able to go, oh, this kid loves animals,
Yeah.
right? It's obvious because look, there's, as I scroll through this or pull up places, and you realize we go to places where there's water. We love the ocean. We love rivers. We love lakes. We love our swimming pool in the backyard. You know what I mean? And so you're able to go, we are water people. So, so if you are able to tag or store, or at least, arrange photos so that you can see them in these categories versus a strictly chronological view. And if you can filter out so that you're only looking at the best ones. So that would be probably two principles. It's just a category system of storage or filing or looking at something, and then this idea of purging and creating a set that are most important to you or most. Yeah. So if you can look at those two together, then you really have the making of very unique connections across time.
Yeah. Well, I love your class, and I think it is something that's really helpful for people. So I hope you will revive that, because I think it's a good thing for people to visit and for new people to be introduced to these ideas, because you have great ideas. Now, in speaking of making connections and things and talking about genealogy, were there any fascinating stories that you dug up when you started looking into your family history?
Oh, yeah.
Do you have one or two you can share?
This is a great grandmother's sister. She's not even in my direct line, but so she planted peas one day, and literally I found the story, and it's like half a page. It's not even super long. Okay, so remind me to come back to that thought, okay?
Yes.
When I'm done telling the story. But she's planting her peas, and she goes inside, and she looks out the window, and this rooster comes along, and he's moving right down the row of peas, and he's eating all the pea seeds she's just planted. And so she is bothered by this. She's like, I don't think so. So she goes out and gets the rooster, breaks its neck, brings it in, cuts it open, finds its little chicken belly, takes the pea seeds out of the chicken belly, and goes back outside and replants the peas. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me, right? I'm cracking up. I read this thing, and I'm like, I'm Jeff, you got to see this story. This is hilarious. And I show my kids, and then I put it away. And a matter of fact, I can't find that original story, so I've got to get back online and find it again, because now I tell it all the time and I don't have the actual story. I don't know if I threw it away or what I did, because I thought, well, that's funny, and I'll put it away, but it just wouldn't leave me for first days and then weeks. And because now if I'm working on a project and something pops up as an obstacle, right? Yeah. I'm like, am I going to kill the chicken, or am I not going to kill the chicken? Am I going to let this just get in the way of what I really want to do with my day, right? Or this week, or this project? And so it's had this incredible message for me about resilience and about determination. And I'm like, if she can go out and kill the rooster, so can I. That's, you're not going to be the reason that I stop doing this, and whether it's a person or I don't know if that makes sense. But so that message, and then just this idea that half a page.
Yeah.
Write a story, you guys. You have no idea who in the future is going to find it. I don't know if this woman, I could go look her up again. I don't know if she had children. I meet a lot of women, not a lot, but over the years, a lot, that are like, well, I don't even have children, or does it matter that I write my story? And now I'm like, it absolutely matters. You don't know who will be influenced by your story down, generations from now. So I just think it's powerful that and even if you're like, well, this idea that it's super overwhelming to record your entire life story, well, then don't do that. Just write 10 stories.
Exactly. And
I mean, not even about the big things you did, about the time you killed the chicken that ate the peas that you planted. I mean, whoever thought that that would be something that I would come across and that would have such an influence? I now have a pillow in my living room, a big rooster pillow that sits on my big reading chair, because that's just
it reminds you of the story.
Right. It does.
Yeah.
I brought it into my home.
Yeah.
3 generations down the road. And I don't think her name was Sarah. I don't think Sarah had any idea that, and I don't know that she recorded it, or maybe one of her grandchildren, wrote it for her, but.
Yeah. And people don't think of the significance of things at the time. I mean, I found so many stories in researching my family that no one knows or remembers, because no one bothered to talk about them. Now, fortunately, somebody other than my family wrote them down so I could find them and discover, the story of my Ukrainian great-great-grandparents' trip to America and the ordeals, getting frozen in the ice and running back and forth across the ship to break up the ship from the ice so they could get to America. It's fascinating.
Exactly. They probably didn't think, this happens all the time on ships. This is what we do.
Yeah. And,
we look back and go, what?
What did they go through to get here, And then the other thing, I don't know if you've ever read The Ordeal of Elizabeth Marsh by Linda Colley.
No, but I'll write it down. I love books.
Yes. This is a story. Linda Colley is a historian, and Elizabeth Marsh lived in the 17th century. Do you know how little we know about women's lives in the 18th century, in the 1700s?
Very little, huh?
If they're not royalty, the chance of knowing anything about them is about zip. I think Linda Colley came across some kind of travel pamphlet or something that was written by Elizabeth Marsh in a library, university library, and she started to research this woman. And what was fascinating about Elizabeth Marsh is she came from a family of sea captains and voyagers. Now, what did sea captains do from time immemorial? They kept logs.
Yeah.
So she was able to piece together from Elizabeth Marsh's travel book, the logs, any kind of records she could dig up this woman. She gave us the story of a woman who lived in the 1700s.
Wow.
And this is like a really rare thing. But there was this thing to trace. So like you said, you may not know, it may not be much, but we have no way of knowing what's going to be significant for people in the future.
Right.
And just the day-to-day things. I mean, I love reading people's letters from way back when and finding out what was going on in their lives every day.
Yeah. Matter of fact, that's been one of the best sources. And I think a lot about that because we don't write letters anymore, I mean, not like we used to.
No.
But I'm always after my
everybody's
kids,
blog is going to be really important, right?
Yeah.
I'm glad you're back to yours.
Yeah.
But we don't write those personal, intimate letters very often.
That has like sort of the details of everyday life, thrown in. And I'm always after my kids with Snapchat. I'm like, you are the most photographed generation and the least documented. Yeah. Because stuff disappears. Like, so I'm like, when you take a Snapchat, you take one with your camera and you send it to me. I'll keep track of it for you. You know what I mean? I'm like, this whole disappearing thing. What? I don't get it. But anyway.
Well, maybe because I think that has something to do with feeling overexposed.
Well, I'm sure it does.
Yeah.
I'm sure it does.
And that answers
but it might result in being underexposed ultimately. So
it could. Yeah. And, there's good and bad. I mean, obviously, we have to sometimes even piece our own childhoods together because we remember a few things. Some of our family remember others. And then things do get distorted with time, though. I was talking with a cousin, and she had kind of vague ideas of some stories that were correct, but some of it didn't ring right. And I thought about it for a long time. And I thought, oh, well, that's probably where she made those errors because they do, if you don't write them down and have that there at the time, things do get subject to change, don't they?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And then even just, I'm the oldest of 5 children. I mean, we all remember we had very different childhoods and we remember the same trip or same event with, 5 different viewpoints. So that's even fun,
Yeah.
to do the comparative, thing.
Oh, I think so. Yeah. Well, finding out, that's a good thing. Interviewing our, we think about interviewing our grandparents, of course, or parents, because those stories get lost so quickly because people pass on. But yes, our siblings and our children, to even ask them about what they thought is really important.
Yeah.
I think, writing down, and kids say the cutest things, and you don't always remember what those cute things were unless you write them down.
You don't remember them. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't know,
And
very few.
I think it's fun to go back and look at them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I'm not too sure. I have to do a scrapbook page on this. I had something that on Facebook, my, daughter-in-law was preparing a diorama for Christmas with the boys, her son and his cousins. And a couple of the deer, in the scene wouldn't stand up. So they put in a Lego guy with a weapon that is kind of explained what happened. I'm going, oh no, but I definitely have to do something with that.
That's awesome. And so you have a picture of it?
Yeah, it's on Facebook. Yeah.
That's awesome. Oh,
yeah, it is. But I'm just kind of sitting here going, well, so what happened to Santa's reindeer?
Right.
But I mean, it does.
Write that one down, or that story's going to get changed. It could have grave effects for the entire world's understanding of what happened to the reindeer.
Exactly. But it's just really funny that they had to think up a solution to why the reindeer were.
Right.
So there's a hunter, there's a guy with a weapon in there. And I'm thinking, I hate guns. I have strong feelings about them. And then I see this imagery and I go, well, it does explain things. Well, it makes for a cool story anyways.
Yes.
But yeah, so let's see. We've wandered off in all kinds of directions here, haven't we? But we're
down a bunny trail, but it's fun.
Yeah, it is. It is fun discovering things. Now, I think, you said you sort of had your background in exercise physiology, basically, right? Is your training. Yeah. So when it came to the writing and the things in that direction, I mean, as an editor of a magazine and things like that, did you have any kind of background that helped you with that, or that was just learning on the fly?
You know what? I really didn't. And that was what it did is I didn't have a lot of confidence in the beginning because I just thought I can't be an editor. I don't have any training. But because I'd always loved stories and I didn't even enjoy English classes that I'd taken in English. I didn't enjoy, although I loved to read. So, I did have, someone who said something to me once that has really stuck with me. And she said, if it reads easy, it wrote hard. Meaning, and so it really taught me that writing takes time. You know what I mean? And you write it and then you let it sit and then you come back to it and you look at it again and you write it again. And then just the idea that something that reads easy is pretty conversational. So, I've tried to over time just learn to write like I would speak. You know what I mean? But then realizing that you can't just pour it out. You have to go back and you have to, move that sentence down. And turns out the fourth sentence you wrote is actually your opening line. And so I've learned a lot about the editing process for sure.
Yeah,
but
it's always
just by trial and error, not wasn't trained.
Well, and I think, the skill of great writers is probably being able to do that process more quickly.
Yes.
I find it, of course, if I can get things down to, the more iterations I do of something, the better. And what did I read? David Sedaris. I think he said his outline for stuff he writes in the New Yorker, that what he submits is usually the 25th version.
Yeah.
And that's just the outline.
Yeah.
So,
and I don't think the average person knows that about writing. They assume that they should be able to just sit down and, write something and they shouldn't, I try to tell my kids, don't expect to write the essay the night before and have it be something you're proud of. That's not how it works,
Right.
I mean, dump it out and then go back to it 4 times and you'll, it'll be so much better. So yeah. Anyway, it's hard work. And I think for scrapbookers, and I'm assuming that many people that listen to this would be scrapbookers, is we put so much more time and effort into the design of the page, and then we leave a little 3x5-inch spot, where we're supposed to, tell the information and or share the story. And so we start, already we're at a disadvantage, right? You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I think just to give scrapbookers the permission to spend, if not the same amount of time, but at least sometimes to start with the story and allow yourself time with that, just like you would maybe mess around with a page for sometimes 3 or 4 days to get it right. If it's a really important one, right? You'll come back to it and move things around, that give them permission to start with the story and put that much time and effort into it. And then now with the story finished, bring it to the page and add the photos and the stuff, so that, even if you did that 20% of the time, I think that's really, really smart.
Yeah. Or
and
really.
Just the one thing. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, or really break the story down into really tiny parts. And then you have a whole bunch more pages that you can have fun making.
Yeah. No, you know what? That's actually, that's so true. And I was going to say, the one thing that I've learned from family history is that I have very few photos compared to I'm grateful. I don't have a whole lot of information, and there's more for me to find for sure. But the stories that I have, I treasure. And I don't need photos to go with them. I mean, I would love to have photos. Okay, so what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say I would much rather have a story without a photo than a photo without a story.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I can fill in the blanks. I can go to Google and show me what, this might have looked like. You know what I mean? I can show me an image of, and get an idea of what the ship might have looked like. But what I can't create from a picture of a ship is what it would have been like to cross the Atlantic Ocean for 6 weeks in a little 4x6 space,
Yeah. If you had that much, I mean, those little
to tell
births.
me that, because I can't come up with that on my own.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway.
Yeah, and you can't get a sense of the other things that can be described in words. No. Now, not that you'd necessarily want to. I mean, I read about that voyage where they got on the SS Arcadia, where they were stuck in the ice and everything. And what they thought was the cure for seasickness in those days was whiskey and garlic. So can you imagine what those holds smelled like?
Yes.
Thank God.
Oh, I'm sure we have no idea. Yeah.
Pretty awful.
Right.
So, but obviously you can't tell that from a picture at all.
Right.
Except for maybe people looking a little worn out. But I mean, that's where the story can really be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And that may be why it didn't get passed down, too. Mm-hmm. At least somebody was
so
impressed enough to write it down. Pardon me?
It was so unpleasant that someone decided not to pass it down.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell that. That was awful. Right.
Exactly. Well, I'm thinking now that I'm trying to think. I'm sure we'll stop this conversation. Like, now, why didn't I ask Stacy?
Oh.
But I'm sure we can find out a whole lot more if we could find places where we can find you. So I think we better go over things like your blog and Facebook, places we could find you.
Oh, that's very nice. So my blog is just stacyjulian.com. And I'm relatively active on Instagram, which is at Stacy Julian. Facebook is somewhat ignored at this point. I always think I'm going to do something better with it, but it's Stacy Julian, Stacy Hall Julian, or Stacy Julian LLC on Facebook. I am working. I have a new partnership with Close to My Heart, which is fun because that's the company I started with. So I've just signed a contract with them to create a line of storytelling products, which I've never done anything like that through all the years. I've just loved using everyone else's products, and so I'm going back and looking at some concepts that I've taught over and over and over again that I think are very helpful, especially for people who are new to scrapbooking or just wanting to tell stories, regardless of what angle they're coming at it from. Anyway, so I'm developing some products with Close to My Heart.
That sounds very exciting.
So I do have another Instagram that is Story by Stacy, and that account is dedicated to the partnership with Close to My Heart.
Oh, wonderful.
That's kind of where I'm at right now.
And well, is that
at Big
you
Picture.
had a class at Big Picture classes, right?
Yes. I have 4. I think I have 4 classes at Big Picture classes. So, and the thing that's fun about the way that once we sold the company, they've completely changed the model. So now it's a subscription model. So, but the good thing is that you can go sign up and get a 2-week free trial. And in 2 weeks, you can definitely get a flavor of whether, those are the kind of classes that you would want to subscribe to and have access to all the time. So, but you can certainly, sign up and take a class or 2 of mine in 2 weeks if it's not something you want to do long term. So Big Picture classes, and then I am going to be teaching again for them as well. So I just, after being so busy for so many years, I just needed a break, honestly,
Right.
And so I haven't, my last class I think was spring 2006. So I am going to start in 2018 and do some more classes there as well.
Oh, wonderful.
And then hopefully on my own website, that's where I'd like to do the photo freedom, kind of revisit that.
That sounds great. Well, we'll be having folk look for that and learn more about your systems and your wonderful ideas and other things that Stacy seems to sort of jump into and discover all kinds of new things about.
And never finish, but that's okay. More important to start than finish, right?
Yeah. Well, there's projects to do, books to read.
That's right.
Things to study. I know.
Yeah.
I feel like, oh my goodness. I finally got a couple of knitting projects done lately, and I said, "Hooray!"
Yeah,
I don't.
Good for you. Well, and I love that you've landed with this podcast. Again, I just think you're doing a fabulous job. I love the variety of people that you're talking to, and how you ask similar questions. And so I feel like I can learn so much, from people's approach to life in a creative way.
I have learned a lot. Thank you, because it really has been fun. And people, I think, in so many walks of life, I'd like to explore a little bit about, some of the things that are creative within science. I mean, science is a lot of facts and figures, but there's so many things involved in people's imaginations that get us to where they're doing the hard fact gathering that I think is wonderful, and applications of science. So those are other areas I'd like to explore too, of course. But there's a whole lot of things. That's one of the things. Being a perpetual student, I love to learn everything.
And that's what makes you so interesting. I mean, there's many things that make you interesting, but it is that thirst for knowledge that I love about you. So.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, we have a mutual admiration society going on this morning because I owe a lot of some of my creative and a lot of my creative endeavors to where your site and you led me to. So that's great. As far as, I think you mentioned a little bit about creativity in general. I don't know, did you have any other specific thoughts about creativity that you wanted to share with us today?
It's in all of us. I absolutely believe that we are children of the most creative being in the universe. So I don't know why we wouldn't be endowed with immense creativity and immense potential. I think that because there's so many people that say I'm not creative, right?
Right. Unfortunately.
Creativity to me is just curiosity applied.
That's a good
so
quote.
If you will just allow yourself, everyone is curious, but we shut down that curiosity because we don't have time or we're distracted or whatever. So if you'll just follow some of those curiosity trails and allow yourself to ask questions like why and how come and what if. Those are the questions that open the door for your curiosity, and your curiosity, without a doubt, will lead to creativity. So maybe rather than starting with, I got to be creative, I'm going to be creative, I'm going to sit down and be creative. You know what I mean? Like, what does that mean? What does that look like in my life? Well, just follow your curiosity and you'll find out.
I think those are very wise words. Well, I have so enjoyed having you on the show today.
I've so enjoyed being here. Thank you.
Very good. Well, I hope I'll be seeing you at some time in the future. I don't know if you have any plans to attend any trade shows or anything in the near future, but hopefully we'll run across each other, or maybe
I'm sure we will.
Up in your neck of the woods sometime.
I would love that. I always tell people, if you're ever in, because I'm in this little corner of the world, if you ever drive through Spokane without stopping to say hello. Anyone is always welcome at my house. So.
Well, as I said, once again, thanks so much for joining me, and you take care, and have a wonderful holiday season.
Thanks, Karen. You too.
Thank you for joining me at A Creative Approach podcast. Show notes from today's episode, where you can learn more about my guest, Stacy, are available on the webpage, www.acreativeapproachpodcast.com. You'll find links to our past shows with show notes for those episodes available there too. Please feel free to share your thoughts and comments with me on our Facebook group page. A Creative Approach podcast website is where you can find our affiliate links. You'll also see a Patreon page tab with periodic stories there from me, and a place where you may choose to contribute to the show. A big shout out of thanks to my Patreon donors. I hope you are a subscriber to the show on your favorite platform. You'll find a creative podcast on most of them. I hope you are a subscriber to the show on your favorite platform. You'll find a Creative Approach podcast on most of them, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. I hope you will join me in my future conversations as we explore a creative approach.